Hi, welcome to Nemex Movie. Today, I'm going to explain a movie drama show called The Electric State. So let's get started. In 1990, Christopher impresses all teachers in school by completing a test that took Einstein 3 days in just a few hours. His older sister Michelle points out that he could go to college early, but he isn't sure he wants to go. On their way out, a soldier notices that Christopher has a cartoon robot on his t-shirt and scolds him, reminding him that war is coming. The robot on that shirt is Cosmo, the protagonist of a popular cartoon show. However, because anti-robot sentiment is growing around the nation, the show gets cancelled. Robots were first developed by Walt Disney for their parks in 1955, and later they were put into mass production, so they became the main source of workforce around the world. For years they worked without issues, but eventually they get tired of working and rebel. The robots demand rights of their own, so they organize protests all over the world led by Mr. Peanut. Debates go nowhere, and soon a war between humans and robots begins. Any person keeping a robot at home is considered a traitor. War isn't going well for humans, and Sergeant John appears on TV to explain why robots don't eat, don't sleep, and don't blink. For 2 years humanity keeps on fighting only to lose over and over again. One day the founder of Center Technologies, Ethan, invents the Neurocaster, a device that links the human mind to drone bodies. Now humans can fight the robot army on equal grounds, and in just 2 weeks, the war is over. Humans win and Colonel Bradbury is named the main hero. Peanut meets with Clinton and Ethan to sign the Treaty of Surrender, while over 6,000 robots are imprisoned in the exclusion zone in the desert. Sometime later, Ethan releases a smaller version of the Neurocaster for people to have at home. This model allows them to split their minds so they can work and have fun at the same time. In 1994, Michelle is at home trying to remove the monitor on her ankle, but she has to hide her tools when Ted bursts in using a Neurocaster. He scolds her for her behavior and reminds her that even if she escaped from all her previous foster homes, he won't let her do so here. Michelle replies by pointing at the pile of stuff he's hoarding, pointing out that taking things from the exclusion zone is illegal. Afterwards, she goes to class, and the teacher is also there in her Neurocaster suit. All the students are forced to put on their helmets, and when Michelle refuses to do so, she's sent to the principal's office. The lady notices on Michelle's profile that she lost her entire family and blames it on the war, so Michelle has to clarify it actually was a car accident. Then the principal explains that neurotherapy can help her forget for a few hours, causing Michelle to revisit a memory of playing on the beach with her brother. That day he had a panic attack and she comforted him through it. However, Michelle still refuses to put on the helmet and goes home. That night Michelle dreams of the car accident that killed her family. She had woken up in the hospital and a doctor was watching her, but she couldn't remember their face. In the present, Michelle is startled awake by a noise outside. She looks out the window and notices a shadow moving in her yard, so she grabs a flashlight and goes out. Suddenly she sees an eye reflected on a bottle before the table falls, scaring her into running back inside. She tries to warn Ted about the intruder, but he's lost in the Neurocaster world. When the intruder breaks in, Michelle runs to hide under her bed. However, the intruder is a robot and easily lifts the bed to look at her with Cosmo's face. Michelle runs to the corner of the room and tries to communicate with Cosmo, who uses some gestures to indicate he's looking for her. This robot can't speak and opens his head so Michelle can fix his voice circuit, but unfortunately he only has a few pre-recorded phrases. Then Cosmo grabs a picture of the siblings and keeps pointing between himself and Christopher, implying they're the same person. Michelle doesn't believe him and forcefully pulls the picture from his arms, causing him to crash against the shelves. The noise wakes Ted up and he comes to the room to find Cosmo. He blames Michelle for this and yells at her, triggering an argument that ends with Ted pushing her against the robot. Cosmo makes the same gesture that Christopher used to make, convincing Michelle of his story before pushing Ted against the wall. A furious Ted grabs a golf club and tries hitting Cosmo, who quickly breaks the club and pushes Ted again. This time he ends up bleeding and rushes to call 911 before Michelle tases him until he's unconscious. Afterward, Michelle and Cosmo get in Ted's car and the robot easily removes the monitor from her ankle. Michelle doesn't know how to drive but improvises when Ted comes after them in his Neurocaster. The car throws him off and the duo manages to leave. The next morning the car stops in the middle of the road because it has a flat tire. Michelle checks the trunk to get the spare, but that one is broken too. She starts bothering Cosmo with questions, so he explains Christopher is alive somewhere and controlling him from afar. When Michelle asks how to find her brother, Cosmo points at Sender's company logo on a sign. Using a Dr. Pepper can and more gesturing, Cosmo mentions a doctor with glasses and Michelle thinks about waking up after the accident again. Now she remembers Dr. Amherst's face and how he told her that Christopher died in the hospital. Then Michelle takes out a map and Cosmo points at a spot in the middle of the exclusion zone. They'll need a plan to break into such a dangerous place, and Michelle remembers all the illegal things Ted bought. There's a box in the car trunk with the address of the sender's P.O. box in New Mexico, so they decide to search for that person because they may know how to get inside the zone. The duo sneaks into a train for half of the journey and continues the other half on foot. In the evening, Michelle stops at a store for food, and when she comes out she sees a truck coming, so she drags Cosmo to an alley to hide. The driver turns out to be John, who opens the P.O. box the duo was looking for and gets a bunch of money out of it. Then a man appears in his Neurocaster to buy a gun from John. Suddenly the client turns the weapon and threatens to shoot John, only to get hit by an electric shot that turns the Neurocaster off. This was done by Herman, John's partner robot, who helps him move the fallen machine while discussing how to get its parts. While they're distracted, Michelle and Cosmo sneak into the back of the truck. Meanwhile, Bradbury finds Ted's abandoned car. The next day the truck arrives at an old mine near the exclusion zone. John and Herman move their latest acquisitions inside, unaware that Michelle and Cosmo are hiding in a box. While John and Herman argue over missing cables, Michelle tries to use the distraction to sneak around, but Cosmo accidentally activates a singing fish and gives away their location. When John and Herman surround them, Michelle explains she only wants a guide into the exclusion zone, but John thinks she's crazy. At that moment the elevator goes up and John concludes someone followed them, so the whole group hides. When the elevator comes back down, it reveals Bradbury. He announces this place is now under the jurisdiction of the Robot Deactivation Task Force and makes John and Michelle come out with their hands up. John tries to pretend Michelle is his sister, but Bradbury recognizes her and says she's under arrest. Herman tries to shoot Bradbury with his electric beam, but Bradbury sees him and uses John as a shield. Then Bradbury opens fire, destroying big parts of the room while everyone runs to hide again. When he corners the robots, Michelle comes out and hits his arm with a fire extinguisher, only for Bradbury to steal it from her and destroy it. As the room fills with smoke, Michelle claps her hands to turn off the lights. Suddenly the fish decorations start singing again and Bradbury is distracted, so John shoots him from behind. His bullets do nothing to the Neurocaster's body and Bradbury quickly destroys his gun before grabbing John by the neck. Wanting to save him, Michelle and Cosmo surrender. After throwing John away, Bradbury starts walking toward the duo, explaining that Cosmo is marked for deactivation. At that moment, Herman makes a huge crane claw fall and capture Bradbury. Then the whole group jumps into a mining car to escape, however John takes too long to find the right key and Bradbury gets enough time to escape. He shoots the cart to bring it down and tries to shoot Cosmo too, but Herman disarms him again and now both robots start fighting him. Michelle finds a bulldozer and traps Bradbury against the wall with it, causing some rocks to fall and bury him too. The mine is slowly crumbling, so the group has to rush out to save themselves. Seeing his home going down makes John scream in frustration and he yells at Michelle for ruining everything. He's interrupted by some weird noises nearby, so the group runs to hide in a cave and watch scavenger robots going around looking for parts to fix themselves. When John sees an opening, he comes out and destroys the robot so he can get into his garage, where he keeps a van and a huge suit that Herman uses to make himself bigger. After lots of arguing, Michelle convinces John to help her. Minutes later, Michelle, John, and Cosmo are inside the van, which is being carried by Herman in the suit. They enter the exclusion zone and Michelle sees all the destroyed robots on the ground. During the trip, John shares the story of how he met Herman. During the war, John's team lost a battle and was surrounded by enemies. The soldiers were supposed to be shot by the robots, but Herman saw John crying and saved him instead. A few days later, the center drones found them and wouldn't listen to John when he tried to tell them Herman was good, so the duo had to run away to avoid getting killed. Meanwhile, Ethan is using his Neurocaster to revisit a memory with his deceased mother, but the device starts malfunctioning and he has to turn it off. He yells at his scientists and demands to know what's happening to the company's systems, so the men reveal that Christopher has escaped. If they don't find him by Friday, the whole company will collapse. A desperate Ethan later meets with Bradbury in the virtual world. He knows that Cosmo is on Bradbury's hunt list and offers him a deal. Instead of taking Cosmo to the authorities, Ethan wants him to hand him over to his company. In the mind, Bradbury's Neurocaster is activated again. In the desert, the group is discussing the idea of entering an abandoned mall to search for food. A robot sees them and throws a fridge at them, breaking the van's front window. Herman tries running away, but the enemy keeps throwing things and causes him to fall. The van lands upside down and the group is immediately surrounded by robots who capture them and take them to the mall. There's a whole society of robots inside, from entertaining models to regular house appliances. There's even a giant one outside that looks at them through the window. Mr. Peanut shows up and apologizes for capturing them, explaining the robots thought they were dangerous scavengers. When Michelle tells him about her situation, Peanut reveals that Dr. Amherst visited this place once and that he has a PhD in human-machine interaction. Peanut quickly kicked him out, so he doesn't know where the doctor is now. Michelle wants to go out to continue her search, and John reminds her how dangerous it is at night, so he convinces her to wait until morning. In private, Michelle remembers her last Christmas with Christopher and how little she saw him since he went to college. She can't help crying at the memory, and Cosmo comforts her before playing the cartoon that the siblings used to watch together. Soon a bunch of other robots join the watch party, which is noticed by Peanut. Later, after everyone falls asleep, they're suddenly awakened by a male robot asking for Christopher. Cosmo raises his hand and the robot gives him a postcard that Amherst left for him. There's an address written on the card and a note saying that Amherst will be waiting for him. That address is in scavenger territory, so they can't enter it without a plan. Peanut overhears everything and introduces them to a training robot that keeps malfunctioning while trying to explain how to fight the scavengers. John thinks he may be a liability, but the robot impresses him by shooting baseballs at high speed. In the morning, Bradbury makes it to the exclusion zone and watches them all from afar, noticing that the group is leaving in Peanut's car. They spend the whole day driving, and by nighttime they finally make it to an abandoned amusement park where the address is supposed to be located. Michelle sees lights in one of the attractions, so she concludes someone must be around. Suddenly a huge clown head activates and creepy robots begin appearing around the heroes. The group immediately begins running as they shoot at any enemy that gets too close. Peanut tries to communicate with them, but the creepy robots only know how to growl. The group makes it to the building with the lights only to discover the doors are fake. The robots are coming closer and they don't know what to do. Suddenly more lights are turned on around the park and music starts playing on the speakers while fire comes out from a few statues. The robots back off in fear before a trap door opens under the group, causing them to slide down into a hidden tunnel. In an underground room, they finally find Amherst, who is excited to see the postcard in Cosmo's hand. Michelle immediately pushes him and demands information on Christopher, so Amherst reveals the boy is on Centers Labs in Seattle. After the accident, Christopher was put through some routine tests and the MRI machine alerted the hospital that he was special. He was exactly why they needed to win the war, so the doctor let Center take him and lied to Michelle about his death. Amherst now activates a computer that plays a video of an experiment. Christopher had been comatose and they thought it was permanent, so they connected his brain to the Neurocaster network to make it work. Amherst isn't proud of this but thinks it was necessary to save the world and points out Christopher would have died in bed if they hadn't taken him. 13 months after the beginning of the experiment, Christopher woke up and Amherst wanted to disconnect him. However, Ethan refused and threatened to kill Amherst if he tried. The doctor decided to run away, but before he left, he established a tiny connection between Christopher and the outside network. He also gave him the location of the mall so he could find a new family among the robots. Michelle points out Christopher already had a family and John punches Amherst for her. At that moment, Bradbury appears outside and shoots the entrance to access the tunnel. He slides down too and finds the room empty. The lights suddenly go out and Peanut tackles Bradbury from behind to smash him against an electrical grid. Bradbury's Neurocaster is electrocuted for a few seconds and he drops his gun, but he manages to push Peanut off to recover. A fight ensues as Peanut reveals a sword hidden inside his cane, but Bradbury is still stronger and easily overpowers him. The rest of the group is sneaking out, but they freeze when they hear a noise. A bunch of soldier Neurocasters appear in the air and land around the heroes, asking them to surrender. The training robots start shooting balls with such strength that he manages to break a few of their helmets. All this is seen by Ethan through the cameras, and he orders the soldiers to capture Cosmo by killing everyone else if necessary. Cosmo throws a ball to distract a soldier and Michelle appears behind him, shooting paint at him until his propeller malfunctions and he crashes into the ceiling. When a second soldier tries to capture her, Amherst shoots him down and tells the duo he knows a way out. John and the other robots keep on fighting the rest of the squad, defeating them with improvised weapons. In the underground room, Bradbury rips Peanut's head off and says he broke the treaty, so what happens to his family is his fault. At the same time, a bunch of soldiers arrive at the mall. Then Bradbury comes out and starts shooting at attractions randomly. Amherst tells his friends to run before he comes out to comfort Bradbury, daring to shoot. Bradbury hesitates to kill another human being, so Ethan takes over a Nurcaster and shoots Amherst himself. The doctor falls on some debris and dies when a metal bar impales him, which leaves Bradbury reconsidering his morals. Michelle and Cosmo try to run away, but they're surrounded by soldiers. One of them holds Michelle down while the other grabs Cosmo to then fly away. Bradbury shoots the Nurcaster holding Michelle and tells her to go home before he flies off too. In the morning, the group returns to the mall and finds it in ruins with most of the robots destroyed. Meanwhile, Cosmo is taken to the Center Labs to reunite with Christopher's body. As Ethan connects him to the system, Bradbury realizes he was lied to and Cosmo isn't just a robot, so he's angry that he was sent to hunt a boy. Ethan reminds him that this child helped him win the war and claims that sacrifice is required to move a species forward. Back in the mall, John tells Michelle that she shouldn't give up and that he'll help her if she decides to keep on fighting. Then Michelle checks Amherst's computer to confirm it has the codes to leave the exclusion zone and the location of the Seattle lab. The computer also explains if they disconnect Christopher, the entire Nurcaster system and the company itself will shut down. At that moment, Peanut comes back and reminds her that he signed a treaty to achieve peace. But Michelle changes his mind by pointing out that the attack on the mall means the treaty is invalid. Using a bunch of abandoned trucks, John, Michelle, and all the surviving robots leave the desert and make their way to Seattle. Herman even finds a new giant suit and uses it to start throwing things at the Center Labs, cracking their windows. Ethan immediately sends all his soldiers out so Herman and John begin running away to make them follow them, creating an opening for Michelle and Amherst's computer to sneak into the building. John shoots at the incoming soldiers while Herman smashes them with his huge hands. However, one of the Neurocasters self-destructs and brings Herman's suit down. When a soldier tackles John, Herman reveals he's got a second suit inside the first and saves his friend so they can keep running. Once the task force is far enough, the rest of the robots also join the fight, which is seen by Bradbury on the cameras. An angry Ethan rushes to his office to put on a secret helmet that allows him to control a special Neurocaster and joins the fight too, easily bringing down most of the robots. In the main lab, Amherst's computer pretends to be a crazy violent robot to scare the scientists away. Michelle confirms her brother is still alive, but to talk to him she'll need a Neurocaster. At the same time, Bradbury goes outside and tells Peanut where to find Ethan, saying he's finally found someone less human than a robot. Then he disconnects his Neurocaster, finally quitting the war. When Michelle puts on the helmet, she finds herself in the memory of her last Christmas with her brother. She tells Christopher that she wants to save him, but he explains that his body is weak and disconnecting him will kill him. He doesn't want to live the rest of his life in this state though, so he tells his sister to do it anyway. In the meantime, Ethan destroys Herman's final suit. The little guy is also hurt and John rushes to help him, but it's too late. At that moment, Ethan is found by Peanut, who says he wants to renegotiate the treaty. In the lab, Michelle refuses to disconnect her brother because she doesn't want to lose him again. Christopher insists he hasn't felt anything in years so he can't be saved, but her friends do need the help. After lots of tears, Michelle says goodbye to Christopher and returns to the real world to finally disconnect him. All the Neurocasters instantly go down and the robots celebrate their victory. John is still sad over Herman, whose head suddenly opens and reveals a tiny robot inside. Chaos takes over the world as all computers stop working. The news starts covering Center's experiments on a human child, and Ethan is arrested while people begin asking for the exclusion zone to be taken down. In the desert, John and the robots help Michelle make a video in which she tells people to leave their helmets behind and enjoy the world again. Meanwhile, Cosmo is thrown in the trash, but his head suddenly moves. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching and I will see you in the next video.